Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is gnaw, and this verb was recommended by the viewer Luis. So Luis, thanks for sharing another suggestion with us. Now let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb gnaw means to bite at or nibble something persistently. And it's possible that nibble is a new word for you, so think very small bites. And as I'm describing and talking about this verb, you might notice I'm not making a G sound when I say this word. So we have a silent G at the beginning. I'm just pronouncing an N sound here. So gnaw. Okay. Now, a second way you might encounter gnaw means to erode or diminish gradually. So again, sort of think of that idea of little bites kind of wearing away at something. And a third way you might encounter the verb gnaw can mean to afflict or worry persistently. We're going to see some examples of that a little bit later. But for now, you should know that gnaw is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, just add ing, and that forms gnawing. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding the letters ed. Now, our base verb, gnaw, ends in a vowel sound, and all vowel sounds are voiced. This means our ed ending is just going to make a d or d sound. We're not adding an extra syllable when we pronounce it. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: gnawed, gnawed. Now let's move on and look at a couple phrasal verbs that you might encounter. The first one we'll discuss is to gnaw away at or just gnaw at. This particular phrasal verb can be used two different ways. The first definition of this phrasal verb goes back to the first definition of just the base verb, and so that's to chew on something. So we're back to that definition of biting, and many times when we use this gnaw at, we're thinking of maybe biting something off in small pieces. It doesn't have to be the small pieces part, but frequently it is used that way. So an example of this in a sentence might be, does your dog gnaw at shoes? Now, not every pet does this, but over the years, I've encountered many friends and family members, students who have had stories about a dog biting, kind of chewing on shoes because they're left on the floor. Many times they're in places they can easily access and sometimes ruining those shoes. Now, a second way to use gnaw away at or just gnaw at goes back to our third definition, where someone is being bothered, right? So we're bothering someone, or maybe someone or something is causing them to be causing them to feel worry or anxiety. So an example of this: her comments have been gnawing away at me all week. Someone who uses a sentence like this might be indicating, right, they're bothered. Maybe the way the words were said, maybe it was the content of what was said, or maybe the comments have them worried. They think something else bad is going to happen based on someone's initial words. Now, another phrasal verb you might encounter is to gnaw on. And this phrasal verb gets used very similar to our first definition of gnaw away at. So again, we're talking about chewing on something, and it could mean the second piece of that, the biting off small pieces. So an example of this in a sentence might be, the baby is gnawing on that toy. It seems to help her as she is teething. So maybe you've seen this around age 1, and it's slightly different for all babies, but right, teeth start to come in. It can cause some pain and discomfort, and for some, it seems to help a little bit if they've got something to kind of chew on or bite as they're experiencing that development or that growth. So that's what's happening in that sentence. Now, let's take a look at using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, I thought we would practice the simple past tense and the simple future with be going to. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known point in the past. So sometimes in simple past tense sentences, you will see time signals. That could be a word like yesterday. It could be measuring a time period. So like 2 weeks ago would be another one. Might be even a specific date. But not all sentences in the simple past tense will have a time signal. It can be understood that this occurred at that known point based on a conversation we're having. We don't have to keep repeating the date if we're discussing something in the past. And it might also be implied as part of a longer passage. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our pattern to the sentence will stay the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative or in a positive sentence, we start with our subject and then we use that ed form of a verb. Here is our example. Rodents gnawed at various items stored in the back closet. As I looked for examples of this verb, I'm a little grossed out to tell you how many different examples of newspaper articles mentioning these sorts of reports, particularly as it relates to restaurants and other things. And many times these restaurants being cited by public health departments that came in for inspections and they discover this. You will see this verb gnaw used quite frequently with small animals, small insects. And again, I think it has to do with this idea of like small bites, right? These creatures have small mouths. So naturally, we think of them as taking small bites of things. Now let's move on and talk about making sentences that are negative in the simple past tense. To do this, we'll start with our subject. We'll use did not and then the base verb. You might also encounter the contraction didn't and then the base verb. Notice I'm not using the ed form of the verb here. Let's look at another example. The unfavorable result didn't gnaw at him. It motivated him to work harder. So here the sentence, I think, has been used a lot in relation to really high-performing athletes. And many of them have stories where something didn't go their way, right? A particular game, a competition, a race, what have you. And they sort of commit themselves to working even harder. And that's where I saw a sentence very similar to this. It was about a particular runner, and the coach was talking about the runner and saying, right, his sort of unsuccessful races didn't bother him. It didn't make him feel worried, but it did make him work harder. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, start with did, then you'll have your subject, and then the base verb. Again, I like to point out to students, notice I'm not using the ed form of the verb in my yes or no question. Here's my last example. Did those questions gnaw at you? I've seen something very similar to this, talking to public figures who maybe had challenging experiences, and then they had the experience of having reporters ask them questions about those rather unpleasant, uncomfortable situations. And then kind of years down the road, someone else will follow up and ask, right? Did those questions a long time ago, did they bother you? Did they make you feel sort of worried or anxious? Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple future. Today we're going to make sentences with be going to. Be going to is commonly used as people discuss their plans, but you might also see it in connection to predictions. When we make sentences using be going to, we need to pay attention to our subject. And that's because we'll be using a present form of be as we structure our sentences. This means if your sentence is, or the subject of your sentence is I, you'll use am going to and then the base verb. If your subject is you, we, or they, use are, A-R-E, going to, and then the base verb. Finally, if your subject is he, she, or it, you can use is going to, and then the base verb. So let's go ahead and look at an example here. Gophers are going to gnaw through utility cables unless we call an exterminator. Right? So here, maybe someone has discovered, right? This is another example of something that might be classified as a rodent, rather small in size, kind of those little mouths, and they're going to say they're going to bite through and damage these particular utility cables unless we get someone to get rid of these animals. Now, if you want to make a negative sentence in the simple future, what you'll want to do is insert not after your be verb. So you're again still paying attention to that subject. So an example of this might be, what you said isn't going to gnaw away at you for the rest of your life. Okay, so here maybe someone is just kind of mortified, just terribly embarrassed about something silly or stupid that was said, but someone else is trying to be rather reassuring. This isn't going to bother you. You're not going to remember it forever and ever. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the simple future with be going to, what you want to do is start with your form of be. That whatever form matches your subject, that subject comes next, then use going to and the base verb. Here's our last example. Are these bugs going to gnaw every tree, shrub, and flower down to the ground? Okay. Now again, here we might have someone asking a question to an expert, maybe another exterminator looking to get rid of a pest or looking for a reason maybe to get rid of a pest because they are curious or they think these particular creatures are able to destroy all sorts of different plant life. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb gnaw. And the first word we're going to discuss today is actually an adjective. I have a typo. I do this frequently. I'm sorry. But gnawing can be an adjective. We've already discussed it as the present progressive or progressive form of our verb. So when I use this word as an adjective, I'm describing something that is persistently worrying or persistently distressing. An example of this in a sentence might be, he's had a gnawing feeling that something was wrong, right? So kind of this feeling that won't go away. It's causing this person to worry. Maybe there's something going on that caused that particular feeling. We might see a sentence like this in a story, again, trying to kind of describe and help us understand what a particular character is feeling or thinking. Related to that is the adverb gnawingly. So now we're describing something done in a way that produces this rather persistent, uncomfortable, or worrying type of feeling. An example of this. This story is gnawingly haunting. So here, that adverb is being used to describe or modify the adjective haunting. And that's one way we can use adverbs. Again, I want to say a special thank you to Luis for suggesting today's verb, and I thank you all for watching. Have a great day.